All right, so we're going to talk about adding and subtracting, but the important thing to realize is that pretty much everything can be seen as addition. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we have 3 minus 5. Well, that can be seen as just being 3 plus negative 5. So instead of thinking of it as 3 minus 5, thinking of it as 3 positives and 3 negatives. Or 5 negatives. All right? And then we can use this concept that if we have one positive and one negative, well, that just combines together to be 0. They kind of cancel each other out. So I go ahead and I cancel out pairs and find that I'm just left with 2 negatives. Now we'll look at this process a little more in a moment, but what we find is that 3 minus 5 ends up being negative 2. Now, opposites are extremely important, and the term is misused very often. What an opposite is two numbers that are the same distance from 0, but in different directions. So both 2 and negative 2 are 2 units from 0, okay? But one of them is 2 units in the positive direction, or to the right, and one of them is 2 units in the negative direction, okay, to the left. Now, we have a term to describe the fact that these are both the same distance from 0. It's the absolute value, the 2 bars around the 2 there. Okay? So the absolute value of 2 and of negative 2 is equal to 2 because both 2 and negative 2 are 2 units from 0. Now, when you add opposites, they combine or cancel. Let's say cancel to 0. Combine or cancel. Now, earlier I had actually basically used this term incorrectly, but we're moving forward. When we say combine, what it is that here we have 3 positive 1s and 5 positive 1s. Well, there's no positives and negatives and none of those pairs that cancel to 0. So here we're just going to combine everything together. 3 plus 5 is going to give us 8 positives. And again, we know they're positive because we were adding positives together. Now, in this case, we have 3 negative 1s, okay, coefficient of 3, a base of negative 1, and 5 negative 1s. Again, a coefficient of 5 and a base of negative 1. Now, in this case, again, we don't have any of those opposite pairs that cancel out, so we're going to combine them together. We have 3 negatives and 5 negatives. That's a total of 8 negatives. Everything is negative. Now, the last situation we're going to look at is when we are going to cancel. Now, here I have 3 negatives, okay, but I also have 5 positives. Well, if that's the case, now I do have some of those positive 1, negative 1 pairs that I know cancel to 0. Okay? So, again, we know that 1 plus negative 1 is equal to 0, so let's find those pairs and cross them out. Okay? Well, that leaves us with 2 positives. Again, I have 3 negatives, 5 positives. They're going to 3 of those are going to cancel to 0, and leaving me with 2 positives because I had more of them. Now, let's look at this another way. Drawing out all those boxes isn't always going to be useful, and eventually we want to have a way that works a little more in our head, so this might work better for some of you. So if we have 3 minus 8, or 3 positives, and 8 negatives, I can break up those 8 negatives into 3 negatives and 5 negatives. By doing that, I create a pair of opposites that combine to 0, and that 0 minus 5 is going to leave me with negative 5. So I decide if I'm going to combine or cancel, and I do that based off of whether I have those positives or negatives there. And once I do that, combining tends to be pretty easy, but if I'm canceling, then I'm going to break up whichever group is larger, okay, or whichever group I have more of, I'm going to break that up to create a pair of opposites. In this case, I took the -8 and broke it up into -3 and -5 because those opposites I know will cancel to 0.